I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Hey, hey. Whoa, oh, 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 whoa, oh, 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 oh.
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Hey, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome. Yes. Keep clapping. Clap if you believe. Clap if you believe. How would we know if you believe if you don't clap? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. This is a blessing, a mitzvah, for you to be joining me, Spike Cohen, and my special guest that I'll be announcing very soon. Thank you again for joining me on this beautiful Wednesday night. I'm actually recording this on Monday night, so we're going to pretend that we know how the elections went, but we don't know how the elections went because it's Monday. But thank you for joining us on Wednesday when you're seeing this. This is a Muddied Waters media production. So feel free to share this and to comment, because we'll still, even though this is pre-recorded, we'll be up in the comments section waiting for any comments or questions you have. The Muddied admins are standing by. And feel free to share, to visit us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter /Periscope. We have the Periscope Twitter. I'm not sure how those work together, but we are doing both of those things. And on our website, muddiedwatersoffreedom.com. And what else? Oh, on SoundCloud. We're on SoundCloud. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. Just type in Muddied Waters Media and you'll find us. We're everywhere. The intro and outro music that I use for this and every episode of My Fellow Americans is from the incredibly talented Joe Davi, Mr. Joe Davi, Jodavi. You can find him on Facebook. I believe you can find him on Instagram. He's on Bandcamp.com, the Bandcamp, Joe Davi Bandcamp. And you can go on there, buy all of his music. I think it'll cost you like less than $10 to buy all of his music. Go in there, buy all of the man's music. It is amazing music. Thank you so much, Mr. Joe Davi. And of course, I'd like to take a special moment to thank my new sponsor, LeBlue Ultra Pure Water. I was drinking Kroger water, but I ran out and ended up getting LeBlue instead of Kroger. And this is actually very good. So, l'chaim. Shout out to Tehran Turks' mom and him. Guys, my guest tonight, I don't know if you know someone in your life who pretty much has all the same political opinions you do. And to the point where it's kind of spooky at times. And they'll say stuff and you'll go, oh, wow, I guess that's how I think of it too. And or then you'll say something and they say that they think the same thing. Well, this is my version of that. He is the owner of Liberate Raleigh, and he is just an awesome guy, and I'm so excited to have him on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to my fellow Americans, the beautiful and talented, my political doppelganger, Jason Romano. Jason, thank you so much for joining my fellow Americans.
Thank you, Spike. It's great being here. And, I just would like to say I am literally talking to Spike Cohen.
Yeah, this is literally an actual literal conversation with Spike Cohen.
I'm really excited about it. I would say, though, you referred to me as your doppelganger. I don't know whether you're familiar with, the specifics of what a doppelganger is, but a doppelganger is not just a twin. It's actually an evil twin. So I don't know how to take you referring to me as your evil twin.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
It's okay. I mean,
Do you want me to be the evil twin?
No, I mean, if we had to choose, I definitely want to be evil. So
okay, well then, see, I'm okay with that.
I just want to make sure you're aware of, the meaning and the definitions that you.
Yeah, I am. I wasn't in that moment. I wasn't remembering the evil part. I think so. If you're okay with being evil, then you can just remain my doppelganger. I'm okay with that. You were the evil. You were literally evil Spike Cohen.
Yeah, I am the evil Spike Cohen. I'm fine with that. Thank you.
So thank you for joining. Whenever I have a new guest on, one of the things I ask, because you're as I said, we have the same political opinions. You're an anarcho-capitalist like me. How would you say that you got into that? I mean, assuming that you haven't been an ANCAP your entire life, how would you say that you came about that? Your current beliefs? Yeah. Is it sort of an evolution, or was there this aha moment, or moment, or how did that happen?
Well, I think it might be able to be divided into sort of a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. You are correct. I did not come out of the womb as an anarcho-capitalist. That definitely did not happen. So what it comes down to is back when I was in high school was sort of when I started to get into politics and, thinking about politics and that sort of stuff. And I was pretty much what you would refer to nowadays as like a neoconservative Republican.
Right.
I don't know how exactly I got into that. I just sort of had general feelings and ideas about what the two political parties meant. And I sort of had a general idea that, well, the Democrats, they're big on social programs, and the Republicans, they're pro-business. Right. So I kind of thought between the two, and I didn't really have a deep understanding of anything. So I just thought, well, business is good. I guess that's where I need to be.
Right.
So that's how I kind of got into it. And I sort of leaned towards the Republicans starting in high school. And then I got further enmeshed into it because I had questions that I wanted answered. I wanted to understand things a little bit better. So I started reading books. And I subscribed to National Review for almost a decade. Like most of the 90s, I had a subscription to National Review. At other times, I had subscriptions to the Conservative Chronicle and the American Spectator.
This sounds eerily similar to my experience.
Yeah, so I subscribed to those. National Review for like 8 to 9 years. I had a subscription. The Conservative Chronicle and the American Spectator were much more shorter term things, but I would still pick them up every once in a while in the store, pick them up and read them. I also read a number of books. I read both of Robert Bork's books.
Wow. You were more of a neocon than I was. Wow.
I don't know. Maybe I was. Yeah. I read both of his books. I'm trying to think of some other stuff I may have read. I can't, as far as, but I owned both of Rush Limbaugh's books. I read those. When in high school, we had Powder Puff shirts. I don't know if you guys had a Powder Puff football game. The senior girls and the junior girls would play.
Yeah.
They would play a football game, and everybody in those classes could buy shirts, and you could get eight letters put on the back of your shirt. So for my senior Powder Puff shirt, I had Ditto Head put on the back of it, DITOHEAD.
Wow.
So So you know what that means, ditto
Yeah,
head.
yeah, the excellent, yeah, the Rush Limbaugh ditto
Okay.
heads, exactly, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so just so that people, maybe somebody listening doesn't know, people that listen to Rush Limbaugh's show are referred to as ditto heads.
Right, right, right.
So I was so heavy into that stuff. I actually had that put on my senior, on the back of my senior Powder Puff shirt. And so for years I was enmeshed in that, and I read National Review just religiously. Every 2 weeks it would arrive, and I would read it virtually cover to cover. But the big thing was it introduced me to something. I read an article in National Review somewhere along the way. It was an article written by Mark Skosin, and he was, I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I don't think I have, actually. I don't think I have.
He's an economist in the Austrian tradition, and he wrote an article in National Review. And he was talking about the Austrian economists. And the thing that I really remember was he was talking about the Great Depression, and he was talking about how von Mises had sort of, his analysis during the 20s was spot on as far as, you know, the inflation of the Federal Reserve was going to lead to a crash, and it was going to be really bad, and
Right, right.
all this awful stuff was going to happen. And it made a big impression on me because I thought, wow, this guy, because up until then, I had never really heard any sort of reasoning for why the Great Depression happened. I mean, you know, this was sometime in, I think it was sometime in college I read this article, and I was actually an economics major. And a lot of the stuff is just sort of like, well, it just kind of happened, you know, that Great Depression. It just,
or they'll blame it on, you know, corporate greed or some, you know,
some
pay on to you know, to left-wing thought that, you know, well, it was
right.
too much individualism is what caused it.
Yeah, and the whole greed thing makes no sense for anything, because I mean, it's like I can't remember who said this. I think it was Bob Murphy on the one of the Contra Krugman things. He said, well, you know, blaming a depression or a recession on greed is like blaming a plane crash on gravity. You know, gravity is just, it's just there.
It just is, right.
It can explain why the plane went down, you know.
Right.
And it's the same thing if you're going to say, well, greed is just an innate fact of human nature. People are, you know, people have greed inside of them. Blaming
perceived self-interest, right.
Right. It's just something that's always there. So blaming a recession on it, well, did they have a sudden influx of greed? And if they did, then why did that happen? So anyway, digressing a little bit, getting back onto the point. So I read this article, and he mentioned, the two guys he mentioned were von Mises, obviously, because he is the big granddaddy of Austrian economics, and Murray Rothbard was the other main one. He may have mentioned some other guys too, but
right.
Those were the two that stuck out. So I thought to myself, okay, well, I need to read some of this. I need to read these guys at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of researched them a little bit and figured out, okay, well, what are their big books? What are their main things? And I would go to the economics section at NC State, where I went to school, and I would look at the books to see if they were there, but I didn't really have time to read them. And so this drug out for years. And then I put on my birthday and Christmas lists Human Action and Man, Economy, and State.
Yep.
And I got those as gifts. And then sometime around 1998, 1999, I finally had time to read them. I don't remember what happened. I think I read them actually at work. Believe it or not, I was in a job where I was in the front lobby, kind of filling in for receptionist. This was what I kind of did during summers and between semesters and such.
Right.
So I had a lot of time to just sit there and read, and I finally read those books. And when I read Man, Economy, and State, one of the things that kind of stuck out, if you read these books, and I'd also read some stuff by Thomas Sowell, who has some interesting stuff. But when
he's not an ANCAP, but he's definitely heavily libertarian, and he's a minarchist, but he has some real jewels that he drops quite a bit.
No, he definitely has some interesting material. But the thing that you notice when you read these books from these even libertarian conservatives that I was reading, like Thomas Sowell and other people of that nature, which I've been reading for years, they'll talk about economics and they'll explain, political economy, but they always have this caveat, this sort of proviso. They have this proviso where they're talking about the government.
Right.
And they'll say, well, what the government needs to do is provide the legal and political framework within which the market can function.
Yep.
So I'd been reading all this stuff for years and years and years, and it was like clockwork. You read this stuff, it's like, oh no, we love the free market, we love free market capitalism and all this wonderful stuff. But what the government does provide the legal and political framework for allowing it to function and flourish. Now, when I read Rothbard's book, I went into it and I kept waiting for that moment in the book, where he drops the free market is wonderful, but what the role of the government is to provide the legal and political framework within which it can prosper and flourish. And I read that book, and it's like a 900-page book. All 900 pages, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop.
To last all the way to the end, any minute.
Yeah, I'm like, is he going to do it on the last page? I mean, is it chapter 25 that he does? Right. So I read this entire book, and it never happens. It never happens, and I'm thinking, okay, I expected that to happen. It did not happen. What is up with this guy right here? There's something going on with him, and I need to figure that out.
Right.
I did a little bit more research, and I found out that man, economy, and state had actually been truncated somewhat because there was some stuff that was too radical. And that became a second book called Power and Market.
Yep.
So immediately I realized, okay, there's something going on here. He takes this stuff, this free market stuff, to a whole different level.
Right.
I don't understand exactly how he got there. I don't really know, but I need to find out. So another book that I found out about was his book called The Ethics of Liberty. I don't know if you've heard of that book.
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so in that book, what he does is he takes the property rights ethic and he applies it to everything. And I got this book because I figured, okay, this looks like it's sort of the book that lays out his framework for what he builds upon. So I read it, and I remember, so up until then, I'd had kind of this slow drift towards libertarianism.
Right.
And I didn't really kind of realize where I was going. And then I read The Ethics of Liberty, and it's pretty much, he builds upon the, self-ownership, homesteading, and private property rights.
Right.
And he just applies it and just builds and applies it, and he reaches the point where he says, and so if you accept all these things, then you have to reject the government.
Right.
Because the government violates this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's the
greatest violator of all these things.
It surely is.
Yep.
I mean, Depeche Mode would be very proud of them when you think about it. So I read this book, and it was that book that I had done this slow movement. But when I read that book, it was just like a hammer landed on top of me. And it was just, I thought, oh my God, this is it. I understand now. I thought, I agree with this. I agree with these principles, with this foundation, I believe in self-ownership, homesteading, and private property rights, and, voluntarism, that all this stuff, voluntary exchange is the way to go.
Right.
And then I was caught in the inescapable logic of, well, the government necessarily, just to exist, has to violate these things. And I realized, well, I guess, yeah.
No, it's true, which is true. In order to exist, it necessarily has to violate these things.
Right.
But
it needs to be a monopolist. is what it is. It
Yeah.
has to be a monopolist, and a monopolist in the non-trivial sense of the single seller. I always refer to that as monopoly in the trivial sense, because technically it's a definition of monopoly, but it's a meaningless definition of monopoly, because it ends up defining everybody as a monopolist, because just immediately you can understand that you have a monopoly on your labor. So nobody can sell your labor other than you.
Right.
So immediately everybody's a monopolist. So a definition that defines everybody as something doesn't really, it's not very explanatory. So when I use the word monopolist, I mean an intervention into the free market whereby competitors are prevented from entering.
Right.
So,
it's coercion to prevent competition.
Right.
That's how I define monopoly. Because like you said, there's so many different definitions of monopoly and monopolism. And like you said, the most pure definition of it would ultimately, we're all trying to centralize to our own monopoly, but that's not, we're not necessarily coercing someone else to not compete with us in that respect. So that's how I look at it. My whole thing with this is that, and what really changed things around for me, all of my belief systems were based around the concept of individualism. Even when I was not so much when I was a neocon, I was very much like, we have to do this for the good of America, and like, I wasn't even really a conservative. Once I had really shifted away from the kind of standard issue Republican Party republicanism, and into more of conservative thought, it was always from the basis of the individual being the most important minority, and the whole individualist concept. But I was always held back by the idea that we needed government, because we needed government, because without government,
but nothing works without government, Spike.
Yeah, we did what and I never even got into the roads or whatever. I knew we didn't need roads, but my biggest thing was, and the last shoe to drop, the last spook I had to let go of to become an ANCAP or even a hardcore libertarian, was the idea that we have to be protected from people outside of the U.S. from coming in. That most people that are coming in for the same reason we're already here, for potentially beneficial economic reasons that we can mutually benefit from, or choose not to associate with them. And that for those who are truly coming in to do us harm, or to do any of us harm, the government's not really doing anything to prevent that. If anything, they keep it going to keep us scared. And B, that that service for protection or any other service is better provided by competing providers than by a violent monopoly that robs all of us and threatens to cage any of us that don't comply. The idea that we're going to get good services from an organization like that, compared to competing providers who are going to trip over each other to provide the best service so that they get our money, that they get our business. I think that's foolish to think that. That was the last shoe to drop for me. But for a long time, even looking back at my old social media posts and things that I said to people, I was held back less so by a philosophical belief that we needed government, and more so by other people are going to think I'm insane for saying this. And I don't know about you, but I sort of reached a point where I didn't care anymore. That in my mind, continuing to pretend that government was a necessary evil was less of a tenable position than just saying what I believed, and knowing that some people are going to be like, you're crazy, and I can go, okay, why am I crazy? Defend your position. I've made my assertion, now rebut it. And I've been much happier the past 2 years as a result of that. But I've been an ANCAP probably since like 2013 or 2014, looking back at old, whether I was acknowledging that or not, I haven't wanted government to exist in any capacity for at least 4 or 5 years.
Oh, well, I've been an ANCAP since, I can't put an exact date on it, but it was late 2000, early 2001. So I've been in this for a while.
So you were an ANCAP during like 9/11 and all of that stuff. That must have been frustrating.
Oh, yeah, that was very mildly. So that was like right after I sort of converted to ANCAPism, and I was still in the arguing with everybody phase on social media. So there were people, there was a particular forum that I'm still a part of that I would post a lot to, and I'd been, arguing with these people over this sort of stuff, and then 9/11 happens, and immediately I get called out.
You did that.
No, not that I did it, but just like, see, doesn't this prove we need the government, Jason? And I'm
right.
No, do you know? No, this is government is why this happened.
Exactly.
Exactly why this happened. So yeah, so like I said, I've been in this for a while. I don't argue nearly as much as you do anymore, because I see you arguing all the time. I kind of went through that phase for the first few years, because you make that conversion and you just kind of think to yourself, I got to tell everybody.
I have to tell everyone. Exactly.
Everyone has to know about this. So I'm like online arguing with everybody. No, you need to understand why you're wrong. This is why you're wrong, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It does not work.
Well, I want to. It almost never works. I will say that a big part of what made me shift from having these beliefs but just kind of toning them back and actually, putting my beliefs out there was seeing other people arguing what I believed and saying, "Oh, okay, well if they believe that, then if they can say that, then I'm going to say that too." And I think that's more who I'm talking to when I'm arguing. I think there's some people out there that they just need that one little flick of the switch where they go, "Oh, you know what, I'm wrong." Because there was some of that for me too. But B, it's mostly speaking to people who have these thoughts, maybe haven't fully congealed them into a ideology, but just recognize that what they're being told is wrong, but aren't hearing anyone say it. They'll hear someone say government's wrong, so we need to follow the Constitution, or
right. That's wonderful.
We need to go back to the Bill of Rights, and because we aren't right now. We need to have a smaller government, and so they think that that's what's radical. And so by kind of exposing them to the idea that, this actually isn't the case, or for people who truly don't believe that government is necessary, but just think that they're alone out there, that's more who I'm speaking to. But yes, I argue a lot, mostly with conservatives, occasionally with progressives. I don't usually argue much with progressives because we aren't even using the same language. With conservatives, we're using the same language. We're talking about property and individualism and things like that. With progressives, I find, and you can tell me if you found it differently, progressives it's a lot more emotions based and a lot more like concepts like fairness and equality and this sort of
I see.
I don't know how to describe it, but
no, I understand. I understand what you're saying. The problem with the conservatives, well, one of them, they talk a lot about the free market, but their conception, and I understand this better because I came from that.
Right, exactly.
The conception of what the free market is very different than what I ended up, understanding that it actually is.
Right.
Like, for example, I remember when I was deep in the throes of neoconservatism, I thought that the I think it was the Clean Water Act or something, was like a really great thing because there was something in it that said companies could have pollution rights. The government would divvy out these pollution rights, and companies could buy and sell these pollution rights, and they could pollute up to whatever the number of pollution rights they had. That's what they could.
Right. Their pollution quota, yeah.
Correct. But they could be bought and sold on a market. So when I was deep in the throes of these things, conservatism, I thought to myself, wow, this is great. This is the free market at work here. The free market can solve the problem of pollution.
Of pollution.
And then I realized, oh God, that wasn't the free market at all. That was, the government said the free market would be an enforcement of property rights, which would be if you pollute, then you are subject to actionable prosecution by whoever you whoever's property you pollute.
Right.
That's how that should be handled. This whole the government saying, oh, okay, well, here's how much pollution everybody can do.
You're allowed to do exactly.
Yeah, you're allowed to do this, but you can buy and sell this stuff amongst yourself. That's not how it works.
No.
And the interesting thing is, I read in something, one of Rothbard's books, and I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking about how originally what happened was, like back in the 19th century, when industrialization in the United States started, the courts were actually enforcing property rights in the manner that I just told you, where companies were being held accountable, and like people would say, oh, well, this company polluted my property, and they would bring them to court and they would get restitution. But then, companies don't like that sort of thing.
Right. Business interests don't like that. Right.
They don't like that. So they got the federal government involved to put the kibosh on it. And they traded the much closer to free market solution. They kicked that to the curb because God knows they don't like being held accountable.
No, of course.
And succumb to, well, we'll just have the government will just start regulating it, which is a great deal for them because they can influence the government to regulate and keep competitors from popping up, and use it as a bludgeon against other competitors.
Exactly. And I tried telling, especially people on the left, that when they're like, you just want corporations to be able to pollute as much as they want, and I'll say, you mean like they do now? Like, I mean, that's the reality of what we live in right now, is that, they are polluting as much as they want, and they put, there's this sort of pipeline going both ways of lobbyists, that work in government for, various industries, and then politicians that used to be lobbyists, and lobbyists that used to be politicians, and there's this sort of this, endless chain of people going in and out. In a truly free market world, you wouldn't see the level of pollution that you do now, because there would be immediate consequences for the imposition on someone's private property that we see happen, and then we see it happen, and anyone that protested is stopped by the police. That's not free market, and because the majority of people that talk free market think that that's the free market, that's what people, they just think no government would mean even more of that. But no, it's government that even allows that in the first place.
Right. Well, if you really want to make a progressive's head explode with respect to the pollution question, I mean, like really make their head explode, here's what you ask them. Here's what you point out. You say, so you're anti-pollution. You don't like pollution.
Right.
Oh, right. So obviously they're going to say yes. I mean, I'm not pro-pollution.
No one's likes pollution, right?
Nobody likes pollution. I don't like pollution. The question is, how do we deal with it? But if you want to make their head explode, point out to them, so you realize that public roads are the cause of massive pollution, right? You do understand that, because that's a subsidy to automobile owners.
Yep.
And that means that the cost of the roads is externalized onto taxpayers, which means the taxpayers pay for it, but use of it is ostensibly free. So to speak.
Right.
So nobody has an incentive to really conserve how they use the roads, so they use them more. So that just promotes automobile ownership, and so there's like way more automobiles on the road, and they're being used more often, which puts more carbon dioxide into the air through automobile emissions. So if you really want to make their head explode, that's one way to do it. Just give them that double whammy of how the public roads are screwing over the environment.
So when they pull out more roads, you can say, oh, well, you mean the main source of pollution? I don't want that either. Yeah, I hate roads. That's why I hate roads.
For crying out loud, Domino's is like fixing roads.
Oh, I know. Please, what's it called? I'm a very wholesome person, so I don't remember what it's called. The porn website.
Pornhub?
Yes, Pornhub. You would know that, of course.
I would know. Yeah. If that wasn't the one, I got more.
Okay, yeah. What is a Pornhub or they were what was it? There was, after one of the main big snowstorms, they were shoveling snow in like Massachusetts or like in like major neighborhoods, major cities, obviously to promote their services, but they were saying like, hey, look, we'll plow your road before, you know, we'll snow plow your road before the people that you've already paid to do it, and we'll give you free porn. So, you know, that's, and I liked part of Domino's whole spiel with why they were fixing potholes. That's what Jason's talking about. Part of their spiel was that the reason they're fixing potholes is because we want to make sure that we get your pizza to you hot and ready. And these potholes are making it harder for us to do that. And so we at Domino's are giving back, because then you get your hot and ready pizza. Yes, it's self-promotion, but it's them doing for essentially for free, because you don't have to buy pizza from Domino's. They are serving the common good because it serves their own self-interest, both in making the road better for their drivers and in all that promotion and advertising they get from having Domino's branded pothole, covered potholes all over the road. I just think it's genius. And you look at that, you look at Uber, you look at any of these ostensibly free market, you know, as free as is allowed in our mixed economy, these solutions that are so much better than government, and at no point is someone forced under penalty of law to comply. It's just, we're going to do this because it suits our interest and it suits your interest, and we're both benefiting from it to whatever degree. So yeah, I mean, when people bring up roads, I say, oh, you mean like how Domino's is now paving the roads? Yeah.
And there's another thing that I didn't understand regarding, you know, free market capitalism when I was a conservative, and a lot of people it doesn't really sink in with a lot of people, I don't think, particularly progressives on the left, but also conservatives, because they kind of have this mindset that pro-free market, pro-capitalism means pro-big business, and anything that promotes the profits of big business. But the thing that a lot of these people don't seem to grasp is that just because you can make a profit doesn't mean that all free market capitalistic activity is profit seeking.
Right.
Like charity, there's nothing contradictory between free market capitalism and charity.
No, at all, at all.
And if you look through history, you see that there are a lot of organizations that engaged in that sort of thing to handle these supposed public goods problems that couldn't be handled. You can't handle them, you know, unless the government takes over.
Unless the government gets involved and still doesn't handle it ever.
And this is one of those areas actually where I think that you can build bridges with the anarchist left, because a lot of the research that has been done into these organizations like mutual aid societies, you've probably heard of those.
Oh yeah.
Mutual aid societies are pretty much groups of people that would come together, and what they would do is like pool their resources together for the purpose of, like, say, for health problems. Like if somebody had a catastrophic health emergency that required something expensive to like fix whatever was wrong with them, they could dip into this pool of resources.
Right.
But it was voluntarily agreed to. But this wasn't run for profit. This was sort of people putting their stuff together and coming up with a solution. It wasn't like a profit seeking.
If they chose to.
Well, that's always the thing.
Right? If they didn't have to do this. It just meant it wasn't available to them if they needed it. It was sort of an early and in many ways better version of insurance, because it was people choosing voluntarily to pool their resources together. And there was also, because it was voluntary and because they knew there was a finite amount of resources, there was accountability there. The other members weren't going to let someone just be a louch and just live off of everyone else, because that was money that could be used for someone that actually needed it. So
you can't, when you're doing all this stuff voluntarily, you can't externalize costs onto participants.
Right.
And that really comes down to a lot of the problems. Like I almost said all of the problems. I mean, that's possible, but could be all the problems relating to the government is externalization of costs.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of them. So
someone else is paying for it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone else is paying for it. But when these things arise naturally, and they did, and this, again, I really think that this is an area of common ground that you can build with the left. Even, and I said the anarcho left, but they don't necessarily need to be anarchists. You're a regular progressive person. They're typically, the reason why they support these programs is they have the very natural, and I think it's a good natural empathetic feeling that they have for their fellow man, that they want to help people.
Right, exactly, yeah.
For 90+% of them. I'm not talking about the sociopaths that are running the government. I'm not talking about them. I mean your rank and file Joe on the street that happens to lean left. They're motivated, in my experience, they're motivated by a desire to help their fellow man.
Yeah,
and they
absolutely.
have genuine empathy and compassion
Yep.
for somebody who maybe they lose their job and they need some money to tide them over till they get a new job.
Exactly.
So the bridge,
or they can't afford their health coverage, you know,
right,
which is a difficult one, because that's a tough one to talk to about with people, because that's something you can't really plan out. I had no plan for MS. I thankfully was insured and have remained insured and had the financial ability to adjust to that reality. But no one says, well, if I get cancer or MS or whatever, you know, and if you're already struggling to make ends meet, that's a whammy, because you may not be able to work. Plus, you need all this extra money to deal with the treatment of that. We know that government makes that whole scenario worse, but it's hard to explain that, like you said, Joe Schmo on the street, that they're like, but what happens if they lose everything? You're saying to cut off their Medicaid, their Obamacare, subsidized insurance, their whatever. What do you say to them? And it you know, you have to then get into a whole conversation about economics, and it's a tough one.
Well, yeah, and the bypass that I think can be done is that bridge where you talk to the, you know, to say a progressive that's concerned about these things and want to be able to help people and say, look, you're focusing on the government solution. What I'm trying to offer here is something better than the government solution.
Right, right.
Because nobody likes the government solution. They're always trying to change it. The left is always trying to change it, and the right is always trying to change it. Nobody likes it.
No one is happy with how government's operating.
Really, nobody thinks Social Security. I mean, very, very few people think that, you know, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are like wonderful, great programs. They're always wanting to improve them and, you know, fix the issues with it. But what I think we should offer to the left, to try to build those bridges, because reaching out to the left it's kind of something that I really try to figure out, because I have trouble relating to them in some sense.
No, I'm where you are. I mean, go ahead.
I don't know how to talk to them. It's sometimes I don't know how to talk to them is what it comes down to. So what I've sort of settled on is, I think the way I'm going to go about it is just sort of say, yeah, I agree that all of these programs that you like should exist. I just don't think the government should do them. Right. And historically, there are examples of people not associated with the government doing them, and it was better.
Right.
Like those mutual aid societies.
Right.
It worked better, and they were, you know, you look at how much money is spent on healthcare over time, it just keeps going up. And that's because it's, well, you know, the government is so involved with it. And
well, compared to something like, there's a chart from the, I think, American Enterprise Institute or something like that. It's a conservative group, but what they put out was true. It's a chart showing since 1985 or 95 or some arbitrary year they picked, but since... It doesn't matter. yeah, and that's the thing. It could have gone back to 1834. It doesn't matter. Since whatever year they picked as the baseline, it showed a bunch of different services and products and how they had gone up or down relative to the rate of inflation. And all of the things that had gone down or remained roughly the same in cost as, again, related to inflation were all things that, I mean, everything is regulated, everything's taxed, everything's subsidized, but they were less regulated, taxed, and subsidized than other things. So it was things like consumer electronics, furniture, pet care. I wish I had the chart in front of me, but it was a few different things, and then all of this stuff, and then in the middle was stuff that's somewhat, more heavily regulated, but not quite as bad, like housing and food and things like that. But then the stuff that had skyrocketed, that had just gone completely out of control, to where they had once not even been major financial concerns for people, and now were the major financial concerns for people. Things like higher education, healthcare, school books was the highest one. School textbooks
crazy.
Had gone up like tenfold. Even after adjusting for inflation, had gone up that much. And those are all the things that are the most heavily subsidized, regulated, and mandated. Any kind of insurance was through the roof. They were all things, and basically it came down to, the more heavily government is involved in something, the worse the outcome is going to be in terms of cost, and especially cost compared to value. When you compare that to, I mean, I hope to God we never have anyone talking about, universal phone plans where everyone gets a smartphone, and also making sure no one can get the top smartphones, because that would be phone inequality or whatever. I mean, I hate to say it, that someone might get the idea to do this, but the phones will suck.
Don't put it into the universe.
Yeah, exactly. Don't speak that out there. But, to see that kind of data and still continue to want government, but I think most people are operating out of a sense of fear. You were talking about with the left. In general, when people say, well, what about XYZ? I've come to now say, you mean the thing that's happening despite government existing and telling you for however many decades, centuries, that they're going to fix that, and it just keeps getting worse? Would you like to talk about an actual solution to that, or would you like to tell me why you think government should still be trusted to do the thing they've never actually done? So,
yeah, and when you have an organization like the government that they can tax the resources away, and they're the ones in control,
right?
And if you want to take this all the way up to the highest philosophical level, where they have the monopoly over the final authority on the definition and enforcement of property rights, they will define and enforce property rights to their own benefit. That's just a natural self-interest. That's just going to happen. What they're going to do is they're going to use it as a way to steal resources from other people and shove it into their pockets. And they're not going to, their concern is not going to be to do it efficiently. They're going to try to do it for their own benefit.
Right, exactly.
There was one other thing you mentioned. We were talking about healthcare earlier, and there was something I wanted to point out before I forget, because I will forget.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of interesting. So you're familiar, Ludwig von Mises, and I don't know how much of his stuff you've read, but one of the things he said was, there's no shortage of problems in the world. That's just, we live in an imperfect world. So there's always problems that need a solution. So the government always has an excuse to step in and fix something. But what happens is when they try to, quote unquote, fix something, they create another problem that demands being fixed.
Right.
So where I'm going with this is, one of the problems that people will bring up relating to healthcare is that health insurance is typically, in the overwhelming number of cases, tied to your job. So if you lose your job, you don't have it.
Right.
But the thing is, the market has progressed such that that's just how it is.
Right.
It's just tied to your occupation. Now, do you know why that is? Because I can tell you why it is.
I do, but tell our viewers, Jason.
Tell our viewers why it is. Okay, so it's because back in World War II, the government was spending out the wazoo and inflating out the wazoo to pay for the war effort. They were afraid of prices domestically going ballistic, which a very valid concern, considering what they were doing. I mean, that's the natural outcome. So what they did was they put price controls into effect. Now, somebody's wage and salary is a price, and they put controls on them.
Right.
So the issue there is companies would figure out ways to get around it, and one of the ways they would get around it would be they would max out, you know, the wage limit, the wage cap,
right,
and then they would offer benefits to get around it.
Yep.
So you would get, you know, oh well, we can only pay you $10 an hour, but we'll give you these neat benefits over here.
Right.
One of the benefits was health insurance, so that's how it got tied. So it was because of, back to von Mises, government action created this other problem that now has people demanding further government action to fix it.
Right.
So,
and that created the pension mess too, because up until then, the way that people saved was they got all their money for what they did for work, and then they would invest in their home, or they'd put it into other investments, or however they'd invest it. A lot of times they would just hold on to physical, like gold and things like that, because that's actual money that retains, it's a store of value. But they would invest however they chose to. Like you said, the whole, you know, with the whole benefits thing, it's like, okay, well, we can only pay you this much, but here are all the benefits. One of those benefits was, you know, we're going to put your money in a pension. Now, pensions still outperform Social Security, but it is still someone else taking your money and giving it to someone else for something else. And so it usually does not have the same level of return as someone who is in their own self-interest making their own retirement choices. And yet you know, it's hard to find a good paying job that doesn't offer benefits now, because that's become the way that it's done because of that intervention from government in the market.
I also find it interesting, and this just kind of popped into my head. A lot of people that may describe themselves as Marxists will say part of Marxist theory is that capitalists will only pay workers like the bare minimum to survive.
Right.
But here we have an example where the government is literally Spike Cohen.
Literally. Government is literally. It is the current year, and the government is literally.
Literally. The government is not literally Spike Cohen, but the government was literally putting a cap on how much these greedy capitalist businesses could pay their employees, and they were literally going way out of their way to subvert it,
to get around
because
it.
the market demanded that these employees were worth more than whatever that wage was, and getting around it to pay them more.
Literally.
So literally, not literally Spike Cohen, but literally subverting the price cap, the wage limits.
Completely disproving the idea that they're, you know, because if the government stepped in and said you can only pay them this much, and they truly just wanted to pay the absolute minimum that they could to, you know, for them to survive and be, you know, labor slaves or whatever they say.
Wage slaves.
Wage slaves. Then they would go, oh, well, you know, our hands are tied, guys. We can't pay any more than this, so you're going to have to make it work. The fact that, and again, it wasn't because they loved their workers so much. It's because they wanted to get the best labor that they could. And so to compete with other laborers, because they weren't in a monopoly, they had to compete with others, they provided as much as they could, even having, like you said, to go around government intrusion on their ability to come up with compensation packages for their labor. So yeah, that whole thing is ridiculous. So that this show doesn't end up just becoming the Spike and Jason agree on everything hour, which it may still. I'm actually, there are some things I've been trying to flesh through. So this is going to be more of us fleshing things out. We're probably just going to end up agreeing, but stuff that I've been.
We're not fooling anybody.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to just be us. This is agreeing with extra steps. So there are a few things I'm trying to work through that I'm not 100% on. One we had started talking about right before this show started, and that's one of our favorite subjects, the Libertarian Party.
Oh wow!
And
well, I don't hate the Libertarian Party. I appreciate what they're trying to do,
right?
And I think that it can be useful as like a PR mechanism. Like, I think if they didn't take the election seriously at all and they just went and like ran for stuff with the idea that we're not even going to try to win, we're just out evangelizing our. We're
leveraging this as an opportunity to spread the message of liberty.
Right, because theoretically speaking, a consistent anarcho-capitalist could run for office. You can do this if you promise not to ever violate anybody's rights. Ever. Which, theoretically, I could run for president. Spike Cohen, I could run for president. It would be hysterical watching me run for president, because in all the debates, I would just pretty much stand up and say, well, here's how it's going to be. I'm going to veto every tax. I'm going to veto every tax bill. I'm going to veto every spending bill. I'm going to fire everybody I have the authority to fire. Right. I'm going to pull I am commander in chief. I am pulling all of our troops back into the United States, and then I'm firing them. And then let's see, do I have any authority over the Fed? I don't know. FBI, they're gone. They're all fired.
Actually, you do have authority, because you can. I don't know if you can fire them, but you're the one who appoints a chair, and then the Senate confirms or not. So I don't know if you can fire a Fed chair, but you can certainly refuse to replace them.
I doubt you can fire them.
I don't think you can.
They get like a 14-year term, and they have such a long term specifically to supposedly allow the Fed chair to act outside of political influence, which like that really happens.
Because that's the magic number. 14 is when you no longer are subject to what other humans are telling you to do.
13 years, and they would totally fall into the federal government.
Total chaos. 14 years, perfect stability.
14 or more years, 15 years, that's just right out. You can't do that. It's crazy.
Oh, that's insane. That would be anarchy.
It would be complete anarchy. Yeah. So, yeah, 14 years. That's it right there.
So, yeah. So my thing, and what I'm trying to figure out with the Libertarian Party is, I don't think they're doing any harm. So next week I'm having 3 people on who are from very different schools of thought on libertarianism. But what they do all share is that they're all Libertarian Party members. In fact, one of them is actually one of the regional, is the at-large representative, and one of them heads up a caucus, the Socialist Caucus for the Libertarian Party, and the other one is just a general activist for libertarianism. And they have very diverging ideas on what to do, but they all agree that, they need to grow the Libertarian Party and start winning some darn elections. And there are also Libertarian Party members who you can tell, if they win an election, that's great, but that's not their primary concern. Their primary concern is just getting in front of as many people as possible, even under the auspices of I'm running for office, and just sharing pure libertarian thought. I think if my health was a little better, I'd probably run for office, just for a combination of the kicks, and hopefully it'd help the show's ratings. And
I would vote for you, Spike. And if I was not in your jurisdiction, I would illegally vote for you.
Would illegally vote? Be an illegal vote?
I would commit voter fraud to come down to
Raleigh man caught stuffing ballots. But so I've thought of that, but I think we're on the same wavelength that they're not harming anyone, and it can possibly use for good. I guess my question is, how much energy do you think needs to be spent on that compared to possibly other pursuits that might help the cause? And do you think there are other pursuits that can better help push along the idea of moving, if not towards a stateless society, at least a society where the state is much less involved than it is now?
You mean a state that only taxes me 37%?
Right. Yes.
Or whatever it is.
Limited government.
I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head. I don't follow it quite that closely. But yeah. So I think that the libertarian, you outlined 2 paths for the Libertarian Party: we need to win elections versus we need to use it as a propaganda machine. Propaganda has such a bad connotation to it, but evangelism.
It's all part. This show is propaganda. It's all propaganda.
The show is propaganda.
This show is pure propaganda. I can tell you that.
100% propaganda. I would say that it needs to go down the latter path, where it's just evangelizing libertarian policies and ideas. If you go in with the thought that you need to win elections, if you remember, I posted I mentioned Harold Hotelling. You remember me mentioning Harold Hotelling on Facebook?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay. So Harold Hotelling was an economist,
Right.
and I told you all this, so I'll just kind of reiterate it here for people listening.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about him, and I'm not an expert on him, so if I muck up some of his theories, and this actually isn't totally applicable, I'm sorry. I just remember I was in a graduate class for industrial engineering, and the professor was talking about logistics networks and warehouses and things like that. And he pointed out that there's this city, I think in Pennsylvania, that it's like out in the middle of nowhere, but there are tons of warehouses there for a bunch of major, huge retailers and companies. And the reason why is because this particular location optimizes, like minimizes the cost to ship to a number of major cities. It's like if you put it right here, if you have like all your stuff here, the cost of shipping it from there to like New York and Chicago or Boston and Philadelphia, it minimizes it. So all these companies just focused in this area. And he pointed out, this goes back to like Harold Hotelling, who has his theory where there, under certain circumstances, under certain conditions, companies have an incentive to make their products closer to each other. But this also applies to logistics networks in the sense that it makes sense for them to cluster together these warehouses. And he brought up a couple of other examples. He said if you walk on the beach, typically, and these are not perfect things, it's just like a general tendency. So there's always going to be outliers.
Of course, there are always exceptions to the rule.
But the point he was making was, he said, if you walk on the beach and you just kind of pay attention to where the food vendors are, they'll tend to cluster together, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to maximize the number of customers they get.
Right.
And there's another thing. There was another one I was going to say. Oh, car dealerships. If you notice as you drive around town, oftentimes you'll come across this area where there's like a whole bunch of car dealerships.
Right in that one spot,
in that one spot.
And it's not because of any zoning or anything that requires all car dealerships to be there. It just, they just are,
They're trying to maximize their customers.
Right.
And this professor just sort of, and the amazing thing was, he just threw it out. He like literally spent like 5 to 10 seconds. He just threw it out randomly and said, oh yeah, and this applies to the two major political parties. And then he just went on talking about logistics. just threw it out there.
The most profound thing he said in the whole thing. Just kind of.
The only thing I remember from that class is that 10-second comment related to Harold Hotelling's theory to political parties, which, when you apply it, what it means is the parties are trying to maximize their votes. And in order to do that, they have to move towards each other. Because if you move too far away, you start catering to smaller and smaller portions of the population.
And you're not maximizing your resources, You're
not maximizing it. So what happens is the Democrats and Republicans move towards each other such that they're virtually identical. And what they're arguing over is, they're not arguing over anything profound, like from even like a far right-wing perspective, a far left-wing perspective, or a far libertarian perspective. They're not talking about like Bernie Sanders, well, let's nationalize everything. Well, I don't know if he wants to nationalize everything, but like an extreme socialist might want to nationalize a whole bunch of stuff. A conservative may want to, well, we're going to force prayer into all the schools everywhere, and it's only going to be Christian prayer, and so on and stuff like that. Or like an extreme libertarian would say, hey, let's end the Federal Reserve. Nobody can make those arguments and gain votes. So the two major parties move towards this sort of, I'm going to say center, even though it may not necessarily be the political center, but they're going to move towards each other, and they're going to differ in very tiny degrees. It's like the Republicans, well, we want to have a top tax rate of 39%. No, you can't do that. Sorry, the Republicans would want 36%. The Democrats would want 39%.
39%, or
It's at best a marginal difference. So where I'm going with this is, because of this, if the Libertarian Party wants to maximize their votes and win, if they want to win elections, they have to maximize their votes. If they want to maximize their votes, they have to move towards the major parties. That's the way they have to do it. The only way they could win elections without moving towards the major parties is if they could convince people of libertarian principles, which means they would already have done the evangelism.
Right, which is why that's the most important part of it. Yeah.
Which is, right, exactly. You have to change people's minds in order to win the elections by running on libertarian principles.
Yep.
So you can't put the cart before the horse. You have to do the hard work of, getting the message out there and talking to people and, convincing people. And you have to, and I don't want to say convincing people because you can't convince anyone, and I've learned this, you can't convince anyone of anything. It'll never happen.
Right.
They have to convince themselves.
Right.
All you can do is present the idea.
Yep. And
that's why I almost never argue like out on social media anymore. In fact, I will, to my ego's screaming agony, back out of things that my ego is like yelling at me. Oh my God, Jason, you could crush
this person is wrong. They're so wrong, and they're so stupid
so
with their
wrong.
wrongness. Yeah.
I could crush them in such a manner that they would feel like an absolute moron by the time I am through with them. 10 different ways they don't even see coming.
Except they don't, and that's the problem.
They would never see it coming.
Almost never do you see someone go, "Hey, that's a good point, man. I think I was wrong about all of this."
Right, and
like, it takes a really hardcore stoic to be able to have someone passionately present a countering argument and go, "Yeah, you know what? I think I agree with that." Right. And from this subset of people, you're definitely not going to get that. You have just doubled down on why they, and I say this as someone who argued probably 7 times today, they're just going to double down on this person hates America, this person hates the poor, this person doesn't care about the things I think are important. So talking about this with the Libertarian Party kind of goes back to, I guess, more of an overarching question, because I've had a lot of people that, once they really, when I'm having a real discussion, not just an argument, but an actual discussion, and they'll cede all or most of the points that I'm making, and they'll say, but, when has this ever happened? Or, is it possible, how what's your plan to make this happen? To which I say, that's not, I don't have to tell you how all of society is going to run in order to say that this would be a better way for it to happen. It's on them to do it. But to that end, do you think, I guess it's a multi-part question, but do you think that
A, B, C,
do you think, and then 2C, no, do you think that people, even after being convinced that most people even truly want to be free, as what free actually means, not I'm a free American, but like actually free, B, do you think that there's really an effective way to get to anywhere even near that, what we would want as an ideal on a societal level? And I don't know if I had a C, but I just felt like, it's always the rule of 3s. So C, well, I guess C would be that even if you could achieve that it would be possible to maintain that. Do you think any of this is even attainable? Because I'm not sure of that anymore.
Okay. Okay, I will take those questions in turn. You're going to have to remember them because in the process of answering A, I will probably forget B and C.
That's fine. I remember B and C.
I think I've forgotten what A was already.
Okay, A was, do you think... A was, do you think... I threw a lot at you, and I apologize for that. Jason, tell me every one of these things right now. No, so A was, do you think people even truly will want to be free?
Okay, I have an answer to that.
Okay.
Here's the problem. The problem is not that people don't want to be free. The problem is they don't want their neighbor to be free.
And you're correct. And that's what I meant. Do they want everyone to be free? Yes, they want to be left alone. But do you think most people want actual freedom where everyone is free to do what they want, harming no one else?
I think that's the challenge before us, is to make that case. And the thing is, I described it in those terms that they want to be free, but they don't want their neighbor to be free. I don't think anybody consciously thinks that. I think that that is just it's just the consequence of what they're afraid of.
Right.
It's like, well, I know that I'm a good person. I think I should be able to buy any firearm I like.
Right.
But Bob over there, I don't know about him. He might use it to kill people. They're not consciously, it's not like they're thinking, well, I want to be free, but I want to push tyranny on other people.
Right, of course.
That's just the outcome of their thinking.
Their fear, right.
So what we need to do is just make the case that freedom for everybody is better. It's a difficult case to make. And, well, you know, it's just pretty much don't hurt people and take their stuff. But applying it to everything can get messy.
Right.
So that's my answer to A. I think that deep down they do. It's just a natural fear of
letting go of fear. Right.
Because if you think about it, and now these are thoughts I have not thought through completely. I'm now pretty much completely riffing. People, evolutionarily speaking, have a natural apprehension to be around strangers, because if you think about it, if you saw a random person outside of your tribe in prehistoric times, you don't know whether that person's there to kill you or be nice to you.
They were more than likely at least somewhat of a threat to you. Yeah.
They were probably a threat to you. So
right.
Evolutionarily speaking, it made sense for people to develop an instinct where if they see someone they don't know, to like be wary of that person, if not show outright hostility towards them.
At the very least, you were going to be competing with them for extremely scarce resources. So even if they didn't mean you harm, you now got to share the creek with him and you know, your hunting grounds and whatever. So yeah, they're a threat even if they don't mean to be a threat. Their existence near you is potentially a threat. So
correct. So I think that probably has something to do with why just people have this natural instinct where they're okay with it for themselves, but they're sort of apprehensive about other people having freedom.
Right.
I think that may be, I think, and like I said, I'm just spitballing and riffing.
Yeah.
I haven't thought this through completely. I think there's probably a connection there between those two. Especially
the less connection they feel with that person in the abstract. So they're okay with my fellow Americans doing this thing, but not those foreigners. So they're okay with my race doing this thing, but not that race, or my religion, but not that religion, or my community, my, you know, like you see a lot of people that are like, well, I trust Republicans. I don't trust these Democrats though. And I'm like, how many Democrats are in your family? Like, give me a break. You don't trust them. But that sort of like, they're others and I don't trust them. So I tend to think you're surprise. I tend to agree with you on that.
Okay. See, we knew this was going to be the.
This is the Spike Agrees with Jason show. So then B is, do you, because I almost forgot B. B is, do you think that there's an actual viable path to, and I don't know that there is there a viable path to get from today to something resembling a stateless or even vastly reduced state society where the state is not as heavily enmeshed into our daily lives as it currently is? Do you think that's even possible?
I do believe it's possible.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's possible in either of our lifetime. I do believe that it is possible. And it starts with two things. One, evangelism, where we are convincing people, and well, again, I don't like that, but where we are getting them, we are presenting the ideas,
guiding people.
We're presenting the ideas to people for them to consider and hope they convince themselves. That's really all you can do. And on the other hand, I think that the best way to get from point A to point B, where point A is where we are now and point B is a stateless society, is to engage in agorism and build economic market networks that exist outside of government. I think that's the only way to do that.
Yeah.
To move towards that, because it's one thing to say, well, we want to get to this society, and people naturally want to know, well, how would you do A, B, C, D, and E?
Right.
You can start building some sort of market where people are actually starting to do these things outside of government influence. And it's not going to be perfect because you can't totally divorce yourself from it, I don't think. But if you could get just like 95% of the way there, where people are exchanging things and doing things and building things,
Right.
that you can point to that and say, yeah, this can work because look what they're doing. Look at this right here. And towards that end, I think that a couple things I'm excited about are cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and 3D printing. Those two things could really drive home the whole, yeah, this can be done. Because if people are buying and selling stuff that they built on their 3D printer,
using cryptocurrency as a medium for exchange.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry, I meant to specify. Yeah, using Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple, and all that good stuff.
Right.
To buy and sell stuff that they're building in their homes with 3D printers, outside of the doing it all anonymously. And there are cryptocurrencies out there specifically for that sort of thing. That's
right.
If people start actually doing that, and I think it may be that technology needed to progress to a point where these solutions could present themselves before, like, you could build towards a critical mass of convincing people of this, of the idea of a stateless society being viable.
Right. It was always the case that a truly market economy and society is going to be better than a command one, but technology makes it so much easier to show it to someone that look how much easier this works. The internet, I think, has done a tremendous job in making people realize just how unnecessary the monopolization of information and the ability to project force is. You don't need that. The ability now to communicate the way I'm communicating with you, I could just as easily be communicating with someone in Thailand or California. Anywhere. Yeah, I mean, on my next episode, everyone's gonna be I believe in California. Someone anywhere. It really breaks down the whole concept, first of all, of you and us, and us versus them, and it also just shows how unnecessary these monopolies of violence are for us to be able to communicate and cooperate and associate with each other on a daily basis.
Yeah, and just the whole dissemination of information through the internet allows us to reach a much greater audience. Like you said, you can reach people all over the world. It's not like, 30 years ago where you could live decades and not even hear the words anarcho-capitalism. And even if you heard it, how do you find out?
Right, how do you even know what it is? Exactly.
Yeah. Find more. There is no anarcho-capitalist section in the library. That would be pretty much, okay, well, I need to go to the library and find out about this stuff. Right. Nowadays, if you want to find out about it, like if I was a teenager now and I read that article in National Review so many years ago, I could literally Spike Cohen. Literally Google Ludwig von Mises. What would the first thing to pop up would be the Ludwig von Mises Institute on the internet. I would click there. I would, root around there. And then I would realize all these books that I heard about, they're there for free that I could read online if I didn't even want to spend the money. I could just sit at my computer and just read Human Action from beginning to end, read Man, Economy, and State and Power and Market.
Yep.
All this stuff, I wouldn't have to spend a dime.
Yep.
Because all this stuff is just there at my fingertips.
Yep, exactly.
The internet has just been a boon. That's a wonderful thing, which is, fed into cryptocurrencies and, 3D printing, like I said. That's another big one that I'm very hopeful about.
Yeah.
I hope. We'll see. So I'm not confident on the time frame as far as when we could get there, but I do have hope that we can get there. I do believe that we can reach a stateless society.
Well, good. Yeah, I hope so. My whole thing is this, because I'm a believer as well, and so I say to people, look, I don't think sin's ever going to end either. But I'm not going to stop saying that sin's bad, or that, or that this is the right way. So, are we ever going to achieve statelessness? We are at least as likely to achieve statelessness as we are to achieve a government that limits itself because a piece of paper tells it to. So I like our chances. And so you continue calling for the government to do something it's never done before, and I'll continue saying that we don't need any of this and that there is a better way and that we can go towards that. This kind of feeds into C. There was a C, and I did remember it. I think I'm very proud of myself that I remembered my A, B, and C on this, which is that let's say we achieve this, and we are in a stateless society. Not necessarily there are no other governments on Earth, but that at least where we are, there isn't. The question is, what's going to keep China from invading us and forcing us to be Chinese?
Well, why would they want us to be Chinese? Are they going to engage in genetic?
Or you know what I mean? To be to speak. If it wasn't for government, you'd be speaking Chinese and be forced to pay Chinese taxes.
Well, here's the thing. If we have a stateless society, and I don't know how big you're talking, like if it was just a city, if we were able to get like something the size of a city,
right,
that was stateless, and say China decided to conquer that city, we're pretty much screwed. There's no way to repel that magnitude.
That big of a thing, right?
Unless we have nukes. Then it becomes a whole different ballgame.
Right.
So what you would need in order to guarantee that you couldn't be conquered is to have nukes, which coincidentally is why so many countries in the Middle East want nukes.
To stop from getting bombed by major powers, yeah.
Did I just way diverge into
No, but it's true. I tell people, I say, hey, look, take your anti-gun control argument and apply it to the world stage. They want this to prevent, right now they're a no bombing zone. They have up no bombing zone signs. That nuke says, hey, you're not bomb us if you want. You're going to wish you hadn't. And countries that have nukes don't get bombed by other countries. So
yeah, it's true.
It is what it is. But yeah, no, absolutely.
Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So yeah, a lot of it would depend on the scale. There's also, and I've pondered, this is another thing I've pondered over time, the whole idea of why do countries invade other countries? Because they want resources, they want something, they want the wealth.
Right.
And when you look in the past, you could do that if the capital base had not built up very much. Like if you look hundreds of years ago, there really wasn't that much capital. Capital being defined as goods which are used to produce other goods.
Right.
So say the Vikings could pretty much loot every year, and it doesn't matter if they just loot and pillage every year because there's no long-term capital in place. They're not destroying long-term capital.
Right.
So if you have a stateless society of sufficient magnitude that it has, given that it would have, complete freedom, the economic development would be much faster there. So even if you wanted to, if an outside state wanted to conquer that area, how would they do it? If they did it by force of arms, you would destroy most of the capital in place, which kind of defeats the purpose, because you want to have it, because you want to benefit from it, but in order to get it, you have to destroy it. And the other thing is, as opposed to like a state where there is a hierarchical a top-down hierarchy of power, where there's a military that's centrally controlled.
Right.
All you have to do is convince that central power to surrender.
And it's over, you win. Yeah, exactly.
That's like 90% of the fight right there. I mean, there's going to be pockets of people that hold out, but that central authority has built up, obedience to it. So most of the people are just going to fall in line to whatever that central authority says. That doesn't exist in a stateless society. You're not gonna. There's no central authority that can step in and you know, that an outside invader could just step in and conquer.
Right.
In other way, or in some other way, convince to surrender. You pretty much have to take it tooth and nail, you know, foot by foot. You have to conquer the entire area. So there's a whole different problem in place there. So yeah, those are a couple different ways that it really wouldn't be worth it that much.
Yeah, that's go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just one other thing. And
Yeah.
it popped into my head, and I forget things a lot, Spike. The thing is, you don't have to repel directly a foreign invader. You just have to make occupying your territory not worth the cost.
Right, right.
That's all you have to do, and you don't need much to do it. You can do it just with like arms you can hold on your body. I mean, you can stick anti-aircraft devices. You can like carry those around pretty much.
Right.
You know, I used to work with a guy who was in the Army for 20 years, and he pretty much told me, he said, Jason, I'm going to be honest. You can equip a person just with stuff that they can carry that can ruin like a whole platoon's day. I mean, like
just that one person, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
and because there would be no laws outlawing private ownership of
these things, everyone could potentially be an anti-aircraft gunner, right?
Right, everybody could potentially have this. I mean, just things like all you need is if you have a rifle that has a rocket, not an RPG, but just a grenade launcher on it.
Right.
You can ruin so much stuff. You can just like ruin their day completely.
Right.
Unless they like bring in the tanks.
Yeah.
And if they bring in the tanks, they're probably going to wreck everything anyway. And then what, you know.
What have they done? Exactly. They've just destroyed for no reason.
So
yeah.
It just comes down to you can just make it more costly to occupy the territory than the benefit that they would get from it, because they would have to wreck most of what they would want to keep anyway. You've got people that aren't going to just fall in line. You've got unlimited private ownership of firearms, and
right.
Any weaponry. I don't even want to say firearms, just any weaponry.
Any weaponry, yeah.
Anything, up to possibly private ownership of nukes. And if nukes are in play, then just forget.
And private ownership of, this is increasingly an electronic warscape that you see on the world stage. You're going to have people that can just hack your military before they even try to get there. So I mean, my answer in a more sweeping way to this has always been, there's three things. One, why would they even want to? Because this is going to be a very prosperous society that they can trade with beneficially and make a tremendous amount of money for them and for the people they're trading with. Why would they want to upset that
to develop their tax farm?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, but trading with our free society also develops their tax farm too. So why would they even want that?
Yeah, that's
compared
what I mean.
to yeah, no, absolutely on their end. Two, we're a society that just demonstrated that we aren't even going to tolerate domestic governance. What on earth makes them think that society is going to be okay? Yes, could they initially invade and overpower? Yeah, but you're dealing with a people that have already demonstrated that they don't tolerate even the city hall telling them what to do. So now you're a foreign invader that's, coming in to do harm. That's not going to be tolerated. And the biggest thing to me, this was actually a big change to me because I was always on the defense with this question. I asked someone this, another anarchist, and he said to me, why do we never talk about how Amazon is going to survive the counterattack from Macy's or Kmart? Why don't we ever say, oh man, what's Uber going to do when the taxis come for them? They're so much better and more dynamic that it's actually those things that they're replacing that are on the defensive. And something I thought is, the real question in my mind is going to be if what was formerly the largest government on earth, so let's say the United States, is, even if it's in pockets, is demonstrating that having zero government at all is beneficial to everyone and that government is unnecessary, it's going to be the governments of the world that are on defensive from their own people who are saying, yeah, we want that too. So I think you're going to see a lot more, much more likely than China trying to invade America or what used to be the U.S., federal territory or whatever. I think you're going to be much more likely hearing about Chinese people hiring American-based firms to help them remove their government. I think you're going to see a lot more removal services than that. And that was really what opened my eyes to, if we truly are a more dynamic society, we're more dynamic in every way. We're richer, we're more prosperous, we're more able to adjust to things like, disasters and everything else, or crises that are, external things that we can't control. We're going to be better equipped to deal with that stuff, and we're going to be completely decentralized, like you said, heavily armed. So why would anyone, A, why would they even want to upset that? And B, they're going to be too busy resisting their own citizens saying, yeah, we want that too, in my mind anyway.
No, that makes perfect sense. And the other thing is, there would be no immigration laws in Anarchocapitalist. So once it was up and running, within it wouldn't even take a year. It would be like a day. People would just start moving here. So all these people would just start moving here from all over.
Right.
So if the Chinese government is like, yeah, we're gonna take up, where'd everybody go?
We're
gonna conquer those people.
To arms. Wait, where is everyone? Yep.
Oh, you guys are over. You're over there now. How did
Yeah.
you get over there? Oh crap! So yeah, you would have the population, and I'm sure there are some people that are not happy about that, hearing that, but it's true. That's a whole different thing. I made eight videos on it. So, but yeah, you would have people from all over just immediately moving here, and it would just be extremely prosperous. And so if another state wanted to declared war on this area, that I don't know whether they would even have the manpower to do it, because people would just defect here.
Right. That's what I think. And I think also simultaneously you got people moving into the free territories, and I think that the free territories expand too. I think you're going to see governments who are saying, okay, we're going to lose all this anyway. Hey, this group, would you like to buy this territory from us, and we'll cede control to you? And then, yeah, sure. And then, I think, and then you also have people that'll just violently resist and say, we reject the government. We want to live like they do. So I think you'd see people moving into it, and you'd see it expanding as well. Once it could effectively be demonstrated to work in one area, that entire argument of, well, we need government because it's never worked without government is gone. And so I think that's what would happen, is you would see, I think it would be a domino effect that would happen within a generation. You would see an almost stateless world, just because it would have been so easily demonstrated. And the few states that would be left would have to be such oppressive, airtight fortress states, almost like North Korea's, just to try to maintain their power. And they would eventually crumble once either that oligarch died, or someone assassinated him, or they just couldn't resist their citizens any longer. I don't see, I think the greater question is, if the US government went away and we had an anarchist society, how are those other governments going to survive?
Yeah, and I don't even think it would take an area the size of the United States government. If we could just get something like the size of South Carolina or North Carolina,
yep.
Just, I don't know. Well, Rhode Island might be too small, but just a state of sufficient size,
right?
Just an area of sufficient size that it's not like, oh, well, that's just those crazies in that town. That could
right.
over a wide area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once it became obvious that this is the way that this can work, and it's the best way, yeah, a couple things would happen. People would immediately start moving here. The problem might be that initially, while it's still pretty small, the invasions could happen.
Right.
But once it's demonstrated, and once that, well, it's never happened, it can't work, once that genie is out of the bottle, I think even if that area was conquered, that seed would have been planted all over the world.
Right.
That would pretty much take care of it. And then, yeah, I agree. The domino effect, I think, would probably happen. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that domino effect will happen. I don't think, like I said, I honestly don't think it'll happen in my lifetime. Man, I would love if it did, but I don't think so.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think if it does happen, it's going to be a generational people over time. Although this, when 3D printing and crypto really take off, it could really change the paradigm in a way that we're not considering. So I appreciate you coming on, Jason. Before I let you go, I want to give you a chance to talk about Liberate Raleigh. So that's something you started.
I think around 2012, 2013. Now the name Liberate Raleigh is sort of like a sister to Liberate RVA.
Okay.
Richmond, Virginia, and
okay.
that was started by Cal Molinay. You can find him on Facebook, Cal, KALMOLINET, and he started that Liberate group. And what they tried to do is they tried to build like a community of anarchists in Richmond, Virginia, to sort of kind of get the ball rolling,
okay.
As far as you want to have an area that is stateless. Well, one of the ways that you can plant those seeds is like getting people together and in the same area. So I discovered that group in 2012, and I liked the long-term strategy. So I took the name Liberate Raleigh because I'm in Raleigh, and the name Liberate RVA means Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia, right.
So my Liberate Raleigh YouTube channel is kind of based on the name is based on Liberate RVA. So it's just kind of where if I feel like if there's something I think that needs to be said or that I think I need to say, I'll make a video and put it up on Liberate Raleigh. And I don't remember offhand how many videos I have up there. I have a video on why I don't vote. I have a series of videos on, it's in a playlist called Foundations of Anarchism, which is just basic definitions of things like rights, justice, property, exchange, monopoly in the state. And it just kind of takes you step by step, building on the definitions of what the definition of these words are and how one leads to the next, and how you go from the basic definitions and you end up rejecting the state. And those videos aren't very long. Most of them are pretty much like 2 minutes long, because all I'm doing is I'm stating the definitions, because I think that's important to be upfront and say, when I use this word, this is what I mean.
This is what we mean. Yeah, so we're all on the same page. Yeah.
And these words mean these things, and because of these meanings, they lead to this consequence, and I reject the state because of this.
Right.
I have other stuff. Obviously, I mentioned my 8-video immigration thing. That's kind of, I consider it sort of a brain bug in the libertarian community, being anti-open borders.
You can't have a libertarian society with all these foreigners coming in.
Yeah, well, we can open that can of worms in the future.
Yeah, that's I only touched on it briefly because it is one that takes a long time to flesh out.
It takes about 3 hours and 50 minutes, which is the total runtime of the 8 videos I did on it. So yeah, that's a whole different can of worms. But I have other stuff. I did one on, there was Jeff Deist did a speech that got a lot of controversy. I don't know if you remember.
The blood and soil, yeah.
I did a video on that because I didn't really care much about him saying the words blood and soil.
Right.
There was a whole lot of other stuff in it I didn't like, and I made a video on it. And one series of videos, I've done one and I need to get back to it. And I set the book aside because I thought I might mention it at some point. It's this book here. This is called The Voluntary City. It's an anthology, and I started reading it like a year ago, and I've only read the first chapter. But what this book does is it's called Choice, Community, and Civil Society. And it's a really interesting book. What they do is each chapter sort of takes, it looks at if there was a city that was completely stateless,
right,
how would it provide all of the services? But the interesting thing about this book is it's not theoretical. what it does is it talks about historical examples of people privately providing all these things. So it goes through pretty much everything except for national defense is covered. I have another book that goes into national defense. I may do a series of videos on that. But I did one video on this like almost a year ago, just kind of introducing this book, and then I just dropped it. And I started reading this book again recently. So I'm going to start making videos on this. And it talks about stuff like urban planning, mutual aid societies, courts of law, and police services. Just pretty much everything that you would need in a city for a city to be viable.
Yeah, yeah.
The infrastructure involved. And I'm gonna make videos, a series of videos going over. I don't want to get too in depth because then I'll end up making like 20 videos, and I don't want to do that. I just want to make like,
watch this 17-hour mini series about what.
Yeah. I don't want to do that. Plus, I want people to read the book. I can't cover all the detail that's in the book. I just want to give a high level overview of how the solutions have been provided. You know, not theoretical, like how were the roads provided privately in the past, because they have been. Right. Mutual aid societies did provide the services that, like, say, insurance companies do now. They did it outside of, government interference. So yeah, that's kind of like my latest thing. And then I might go and deal with a little bit of Hans Hermann Hoppe on immigration again. Just because, I don't know, I may have to do it. But anyway, that's where I am on Liberate Raleigh. So I just kind of run my mouth, talk about things. I don't argue. I just make a video, an hour-long video, and put it on Liberate Raleigh,
and people can respond however they wish. So, yeah. And I'll get the address for your channel, and we'll put that in the show notes. Okay. So I appreciate, Jason, I appreciate you coming on again. Any final thoughts? Anything you feel like you would like to share before we sign off?
I just want people to be happy, and I think that they should all dance more. I think they should do salsa dancing and zouk dancing. Brazilian.
Yeah, we're gonna put links to dance stuff in your area too in the show notes, because we didn't even get into that, but we're actually both into the you more so with my health stuff. I haven't been as involved as I used to be, but we're both involved in the Latin dance world. And you're also in like zouk and kizomba and stuff like that.
Brazilian zouk. I'm an organizer for Triangle Zouk, which handles the Brazilian zouk events in this area, the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area, which is casually referred to as the Triangle.
The Triangle, right? The Research Triangle. Cool.
So I'm on that organizing committee, so I'm big into that. I actually thought we were going to spend like an hour talking about dancing, because in your previous, like last week's thing with Paul Gordon, when you introduced me at the end of it, you said, and we're going to talk about dancing. So I thought we
were going to talk about dancing. I honestly, my show notes were very rough for this, and I have dance in here, and then I look down and I'm like, yeah, we're about an hour and 40 in. We're not going to get into dance. So I'll have to bring you back on, and we'll have a dance-tacular episode to talk about that. Or you can tune in, well, this is showing Wednesday, so it'll actually be yesterday. But you existing in the same time in reality as I am right now, you can tune in tomorrow and we can talk about dance, because we're going to be there for several hours dealing with election stuff. So
probably won't, because as I think you know, tomorrow/yesterday is my birthday.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday.
Thank you. So I'm going to be out dancing and doing a salsa birthday dance tomorrow. So I don't know what you guys,
that's much better than
yeah, I don't know whether you guys will still be going when I get home. If you are,
I hope to God we will not. I hope to God no.
Yeah. So I will almost certainly listen to it at work the next day.
Good. That sounds good. So, well, you'll know the results by then, so it'll just be watching us lose our minds. So
well, that assumes I'll be paying attention to it.
So, Jason, thank you again for joining us. We will definitely have you back on soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Guys, thank you again for joining us at My Fellow Americans. Tune in. I keep doing this because I'm recording this on Monday. So you will have already seen our election spectacular. What an amazing election result that was, huh? I'll tell you what. So tune in tomorrow, which is Thursday. Tomorrow is Thursday when you're watching this. Tune in tomorrow. for a episode of The Writer's Block. I have no idea who Matt is interviewing, but he will be on there, and he will be, I think, interviewing someone. So that'll be nice. Thursday, The Writer's Block. And then tune in the following Tuesday for The Moneyed Waters of Freedom with me and Matt. And then next Wednesday, I'm having the Debate-tacular extravaganza. I'm still working on the name, but it's going to be between Joshua Smith, Mike Shipley, and Sam Coppinger. Joshua Smith is an anarcho-capitalist who is an at-large representative for the Libertarian Party. Mike Shipley is, I believe, the head of the Libertarian Socialist Caucus. And Sam Coppinger is a libertarian activist and Bill Weld delegate. Bill Weld. So we're going to be talking about that next Wednesday. So thank you again for tuning in, and God bless you.
Watch them on the news at 5. Don't tell me how, tell me why.